Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom, glad to be on.
Absolutely. So for those of you who have not met Mark yet, Mark Goulston is the best-selling author, several books, and he started as a clinical interventional psychiatrist and UCLA professor of psychiatry. He learned how to hack into the minds of suicidal and potentially violent individuals to prevent acts of destruction to themselves or others. He next went on to train FBI and police hostage negotiators. Sounds pretty cool to me. Mark has written several books on effective communication that teach you how to get your message heard by using a very powerful communication secret, listening. So Mark, I'm excited to listen to all the wisdom you have to share with us today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I can hardly wait to find out what we talk about.
Yeah, great. So tell us, just briefly about your background and how you got started in communications.
Well, I started out as a psychiatrist, and I had a specialty in suicide, crisis intervention, and I'll share an anecdote. Do listeners like stories, or do they just like bullet points?
Both are great.
Okay, well, this will be the longest story, but probably, knowing myself, it won't be the last one we hear. So I was a suicide specialist, and one of my first mentors started the suicide prevention centers in Washington, Los Angeles. And what would happen is I trained at UCLA as a psychiatrist, and suicidal patients who were still suicidal but needed to be discharged because they weren't acutely suicidal, it was just part of their personality. Dr. Ed Schneidman would go up, do a consultation, and he would call me, and the call would always be the same. He would say, and I miss the man, he died many years ago, and he'd say this, he'd go, "Mark, this is Ed. I'm with this handsome young man, or I'm with this lovely young woman. They're in a lot of pain, Mark. You could help them. See them." And then he may or may not put them on the phone, and then in order for these people to be discharged, there needed to be someone in the outside who would take them on because they were still suicidal, they just weren't acutely suicidal. And so they would come and see me, and I had a pretty good track record since none of them killed themselves after we met, and most of them had made multiple attempts. But what happened is things really changed when there was this special woman that I was seeing, and I'll call her Nancy, and she had made 3 attempts and had been in the hospital 3 to 4 months every year for 3 or 4 years before I was seeing her, and I didn't think I was helping her at all. She'd come in 2 or 3 times a week, and if you're me, this is what she'd be like. She'd be like this. Now, she wasn't catatonic, but she'd be like this. And so in those early days, I would occasionally moonlight at a state hospital to pick up some extra money. And when you moonlight, you're often up for 36 hours. And I remember I was up for 36 hours, and I was seeing her on a Monday, and she comes in like this. And I'd been seeing her for about 6 months, and I didn't think I was helping her. And I sat down with her, and suddenly all the color in the room turned to black and white. And I went, "Oh, this is weird." And then the color, the black and white, turned into a mushy gray, cold thing. And I thought I was having a stroke or a seizure. Now, I'm a medical doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a psychiatrist. So I thought I was having a stroke or a seizure. And so I did a neurologic exam on myself, and I'm going like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. And she's like this, so it wasn't rude. And then I said to myself, I'm all here. And then I had the idea, I think I'm seeing the world through her eyes, that when she looked like this, that's how the world felt to her. And because I was sleep deprived, I blurted something out that normally I would just think to myself, and this is what I said, Tom. I looked at her and I said, "Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad, and I can't help you kill yourself. But if you do, I will still think well of you. I'll miss you. And maybe I'll understand why you had to get out of the pain." And I thought, oh my God, I just gave her permission to kill herself. And that was the first time she really made eye contact with me. And so she goes like this. And she looked right into my eyes, and I looked into her eyes. And I said, "What are you thinking?" And I thought she was going to say, "Thank you for understanding. I'm long overdue," because she'd made multiple attempts. And she looked at me. And she said, if you can really understand why I might have to kill myself to get out of the pain, maybe I won't need to. And then she gave up her suicidality. So my book, Just Listen, which became the top book on listening in the world, is really how do you listen to someone from their inside out. And I'll tell you the difference between listening to and listening into. And I'm going to demonstrate it with you, Tom. So if I'm listening to you, you're asking me specific questions. You probably have a sort of list of them, and I can give you specific answers, and it's moving along, and the content's pretty good, and I'm listening to you ask me that question. But if I listen into you, and tell me if this is accurate, if I listen into you, I have a feeling that this is a calling for you, and that it's really important for you to bring value to the people that watch these videos and podcasts. And you really want to bring them something that will help them be successful. And you want to protect them from guests who are a waste of their time and your time. And my guess is you've occasionally, or maybe even had a guest on where afterward you say, I can't show that. They're awful. I can't do that to my viewers. How am I going to get out of this? Am I going to call them back and lie and say, well, we had technical difficulties and the scheduling, I don't know what I'm going to do. But is any of what I just said accurate, and that I'm listening into you, and that it's really, I mean, it's good to make money, but this is like a calling for you. Is that true?
Absolutely. That's, everything you said was 100%, I would say, accurate.
And the reason you chuckled is because when someone gets where we're coming from and we feel less alone and we feel valued, it gives us a feeling of relief, and it sort of delights us. And actually, my book, Just Listen, is about that, is about how you listen into people. And when you can do that, when you can get where they're coming from, and here's the key, get where they're coming from and care about them when you're there, and they'll allow you to take them anywhere. But you can't do a bait and switch. I've given up a lot of money because Just Listen is about helping people to listen. And there's a number of companies that have brought me in to train their people, they said, to listen better because it's on their website, but really what they wanted is they wanted their people to close more sales. And I said, I can't do this. It's out of integrity for me. You don't care about your customers. You just want to close more business. And you like some of the neat techniques in my book. So have a book club and knock yourself out, but I can't train you to manipulate people. I mean, I guess it'll help you manipulate people, but I can't be part of that, so I can't work with you. And my wife has never been happy about that, but you know, I've sort of stayed true to my values, and people seem to admire that. You know, someone who's stayed true to their values, which is I never hurt people and I never take advantage of people and I never manipulate people.
That's great. I love that. That's amazing. So, I mean, I totally agree with that. I think staying true to your values is such a crucial point, you know, to be successful, not just in business, but I mean, relationships, marriage, life, like every area of life is going to be improved when you stay true to yourself and stay true to your values. So I'm curious about, you know, all your work with, you know, crazy people, right? People who are suicidal or had, you know, psychiatric conditions that you worked with. Is like, what have you learned from them about communicating with say normal people, people who don't have psychiatric issues, people who, you know, just average everyday people? What have you learned from these patients of yours?
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to do a mini plug here, and I'm going to give your people a marketing exercise, Marketing 101. So this is my latest book, Talking to Crazy. This was a book that preceded it. Just Listen became the top book on listening in the world. And Talking to Crazy was just excerpted on Oprah. It just lost out in the Audible Oscar Awards to Michael Strahan. And so what I learned from Just Listen was that the chapters that people were most interested in, there was one chapter called Steer Clear of Toxic People. And the other chapter that people liked was how to go from OF to OK, and we'll call OF fudge because we're recording. And so I wrote Talking to Crazy because there was so much interest in how do you deal with people that drive you crazy. So Just Listen is about listening into people. Talking to Crazy is about listening into and then leaning into them and disarming them. So it's a way of calming down irrational people and getting them to listen to reason. So there's many techniques and many approaches in Talking to Crazy, but I'll give you one because people like tactics, and I'm not sure how this will help you sell books, but we'll get around to that. So one of the tactics, if you want to calm down an irrational person and get them to listen to reason, is something that I call the FUDN approach, F-U-D-N, and F-U-D-N stands for frustrated, upset, disappointed, now what? Frustrated, upset, disappointed, now what? And so the way that works is imagine that you're with someone who's irrational, and rather than going like this and pulling away, which is our tendency, I'm going to give everybody who's watching and listening a process that you can follow, and you'll just watch the person calm down. So when they take a break, from venting, what you say to them is, you seem frustrated. And you use the word frustrated because if you say to them, you seem angry, they're going to get defensive. They're going to escalate. They're going to say, I'm not angry. But everybody will talk about being frustrated because everyone's frustrated. In fact, you're frustrated with me because I'm not talking about selling books, but you're going along with it for the time being. So, so you say to them, you seem frustrated. What's that about? And then when they're talking, you listen for 4 things. You listen for hyperbole, words like awful, terrible, or if it's positive, amazing. And then you listen for inflection. We got to do something about this. And you listen for adjectives and adverbs. An adjective is a way of embellishing a noun. An adverb is a way of embellishing a verb. So hyperbole, inflection, adjectives, and adverbs all have emotional juice in them. So you say to someone, you seem frustrated. What's that about? And they'll mention something, well, this happened and then it was awful. Now, if you didn't know this process, what you do is you get anxious, but instead you use what I call a conversation deepener, and that's in Just Listen and Talking to Crazy. And the way you lean in, you could say more about the awful. Say more about that. And what will happen is if you're talking to them one-on-one, their hands are going to go up because the words don't express their emotion. And they'll say, oh, it's really awful. I mean, if we don't take care of this, things are going to get worse. And then another conversation deepener is to say, really? And their hands will go up even higher. Oh, yeah, we don't take care of this, everything's going to explode. But what you're doing is you're getting them to get stuff off their chest safely. And then when you get most of the frustration out, what you say is, if I was you, I'd be upset. What are you upset about? Now that's important because the upset is a way of saying, what are you angry about? And that's what you really want to do is you want to get the anger off their chest so it can do no harm. And then they tell you what they're upset about, and you look for those 4 different things. And again, you go deeper into it, what they're upset about. And then when they finish that, and you're going to watch them calming down because you're not going like this, pushing away. You're leaning in, trying to pull all the upset out of them. And then when they finish that, you could say, if I was you, I'd be disappointed about something. Are you disappointed in me? Are you disappointed in someone else? Are you disappointed about a situation? Are you disappointed about you? What's that about? And there's something about someone saying, I was disappointed about such and such that really calms them down. And then you give them a word which calms them down further, and you say, this is too important for me to have not gotten this right. So let me run this by you. What you said you were frustrated about is this. What you said you were upset about is this. What you said you were disappointed about is this. Is that right? And when you're doing that, first of all, you're telling them they're important, and often they're angry at you because they feel the world has told them they're unimportant. And then you're forcing them to listen to what you just said, and just listening calms them down. And then they'll tell you, yes, that was right, that was right. Oh, no, that wasn't quite right. And then when you have that exchange, you'll see that they're very calm. And then the end is, given that some or all of that is true, now what? And can you see in your mind's eye, Tom, that you've actually helped them de-escalate, get the stuff off their chest, and now you can have a conversation with them about now what? So could you follow that?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I'm actually thinking back on some conversations I've had recently that maybe didn't go the way I planned, that would have worked really well. And I can see exactly like how asking that question, now what, is a great way to get them to transition into talking about the problem, talking about what they want to do to actually solve it.
Yeah, but the see, often we don't do now what. We don't allow them to get stuff off their chest. So often we go, now what? Okay, and that just escalates them because they can't think clearly before they get stuff off their chest. And so if you follow that, that will help them get things off their chest. And can I transition into something that'll help people sell books?
Yeah, sounds great.
You said it was free flowing, and I did. People call me a people hacker, meaning I hack it. And what happened is I hacked into Nancy, saw the world through her eyes, and got with her in her despair, and she gave up her suicidality. And so something's happened recently, and in the last couple of years, I've hacked into entrepreneurs, and I'm able to look into their future. And maybe we'll do this offline, or we'll do this in another interview, because I'll hack into your future that you can't quite see. And someone that I hacked into was Steve Jobs. Now, I didn't know him, but what happened is I've been giving a talk around the country, doing webinars called Hacking Steve Jobs. And I just gave it a few days ago to something called WeWork. And WeWork in these working places in different cities, and I did it to the people there. And I think it was I said UX, which is user experience on steroids. So here's the 4-step formula to see the world through Steve Jobs' eyes. And the 4-step formula is, and this is the step for writing a book, for your title, for getting people's attention. And I can see you can hardly wait to hear what they are. And the 4 steps are, you need to trigger whoa, W-H-O-A, wow, W-O-W, yes. Whoa, wow, yes. And what whoa stands for is, I can't believe what I just heard, read, saw, or felt. What happened with Nancy is she couldn't believe that she felt less alone in her suicidality. She couldn't believe that. And the wow is after you get through to people's distracted minds, and you know you've created whoa when people say, can you say that again? Or if you're talking in front of an audience and people are texting, someone sort of hears it and they go, what did he say? So you've created whoa when you've interrupted something. And then the wow is, that's amazing, astonishing, or fascinating. And then the is, that's too good not to do something with it. That's too good not to use somehow. And yes is when you find the way to do something with it, you commit to action. So when I give this talk, I show a 1-minute video of Steve Jobs, and I'll just tell you quickly what he says, but I think you'll be able to pick up the whoa, wow, yes. And he followed those steps unconsciously. So I just figured out the formula, but other people can follow that. And it was in the Lost interview, which he gave in 1995, and he hadn't come back to Apple. And someone was talking to him about his visit to Xerox PARC. And he said something like this, and I think you'll be able to figure out the whoa, wow, yes. He said, we went there, and I was blinded by the first thing I saw. They showed me 2 other things, and I didn't even notice those 2 other things. What I saw was the graphical user interface. That's the whoa. It was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. That's the wow. He said, it wasn't perfect, but what they'd done very well, and it worked. That's the And then he says, and within 10 minutes of seeing it, I knew that all computers would work this way someday. And I mention someday because he gets humble. And the reason he gets humble about that, yes, is that he was reliving the moment when he went from hustler to visionary. Because when he saw the graphical user interface and people could play with technology, what he realized is, I'm going to own the B2C world. Forget business to business and technology. If I can make it reliable, simple, pretty, and fun, Apple will own the world. And that's what it did. So if you're thinking of a book title, you want something that creates whoa, wow, yes. And so some of my other books, here's one, Get Out of Your Own Way. That's pretty good. And by the way, it's published in 1996. If you look up self-help books at Amazon, it's been in the top 5 for 5 years. It's 20 years old. And then I come up with this book, other books, Just Listen. Just Listen isn't bad, but it doesn't grab your attention. But when I told people, hey, I'm writing a book called Talking to Crazy, they all smile. You just smiled. Why did you smile? Because you're thinking, whoa, I do that every day. Whoa, if this could help me deal with these crazy people, I got to get that book. And so the Talking to Crazy creates a whoa, wow, I need that today. And if it can help me, I'm going to buy it. So if you're thinking of a title, make sure that it grabs the reader so they go, whoa, wow. Because if they don't go, whoa, wow, they're going to go, nah, never mind. Now, pass. Does that make sense? Can you grab onto that, Tom?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think, titles, book titles and branding is so important. And I think, that's exactly what makes a good book title, is that it grabs someone's attention. I love like how you mentioned with the wow, it's like, or sorry, the whoa, the first step is that you're kind of grabbing someone's attention. Like someone's not paying attention to you in the room and all of a sudden they look up and like, whoa, Talking to Crazy, what is that? Like they just immediately respond. And I think that's so important today with, so much advertising, so many distractions, everyone's checking Facebook and Twitter constantly. You have to really break through that noise. And I think that's the way to do it, is finding those words that really connect with your audience.
And getting back to connecting with your audience, here's another tip. I'll tell you another brief story, which I think is there's something behind it. Years ago, someone, I'm blocking on his name, but he was the editor-in-chief of Parade magazine. Parade magazine goes to, 50 million people. And someone said, you should read this guy's book. It's called The Confidence Course. And because it's like your book, Get Out of Your Own Way. And so what happens is I look up The Confidence Course and no one has written a review of it yet. And I know that when I write a book and you put it up there, it's like your baby. You don't know if it's pretty or ugly or smart or stupid. And even though you try not to be so vulnerable, when you get a good review and a thoughtful review, it lifts your spirits. And when you get an ugly review, it's like, oh, and people check their reviews. And so what happened is I read the book and I wrote the first review. And I think one of the things that I saw in the introduction by the author was that he didn't have a very good relationship to his father. And I can listen into people. And so I think I wrote something that said, the greatest gift of so-and-so, I'm blocking on his name now, but the greatest gift that he has given the reader is he has given them the gift of being the loving and wise father that he never had. And within a day, this guy emails me, the head of Parade magazine. He said, that really touched me. So something you might want to do is, if there are people that you would like to connect with, a lot of important people, well, powerful people do write books. And when the book comes out, often if you can write a review, and again, you don't want it to be so much of a kiss up that it's obvious, but if you can see value in it, and that shows, and you don't just say something, it was a great read, but something that will touch them, people remember that. And that's one of the ways to build a great network of people because of that. Also something, I have a lot of LinkedIn connections, and I start a lot of discussion groups. And when I start discussion groups, one of the great ways to use LinkedIn is I send private messages to the people who comment on the discussions. And I'll find something of value and I'll appreciate it. And if it's something really of value, I will highlight it. And instead of making it a private comment, I'll make it a public comment to just point out what the person said that was of value. And again, I think if you practice it, and everybody can learn to listen into people. You don't have to just be a psychological type. And when you can listen into people and sort of hear what really matters to them and comment on that, and people feel connected, people are drawn to that.
That makes a lot of sense. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, so the beginning of this interview, you kind of like listened into me and talked about like, my goals and hopes for the podcast and so forth. And a part of me was thinking like, well, that's almost like, like a fortune teller, right? Like there's like fortune tellers that, they'll kind of give you some like, vague thing like, oh, you've had troubles in your love life, something like that like almost everyone can say yes to, right? So like, how is this different than that? Like, how is listening into someone different than just saying general vague things that pretty much everyone can agree to?
Well, I think one of my upcoming books, and I'm going to do it with a wonderful, dynamic woman who's really attractive. She's dynamic. And one of her challenges is she doesn't know how to be present in a conversation. And what present means is not being intense and selling. It means the other person really feels listened to and valued. So one of my late mentors, who is one of the top leadership experts in the world, a guy named Warren Bennis, he died a couple years ago, and I'm building a leadership center to honor him on a big internet site that has 750,000 executive members. One of the things that he said is be a first-class noticer. Because when you notice, it's different than looking, watching, and seeing. When you look, watch, and see, you're an observer. But when you notice, you're looking into the person, you're going, whoa, wow. So like I'm looking at you, and I'm sort of noticing that you're kind of nodding a little bit. So you're taking some of this in, and so you're wanting to get the value of this, but also you're the host, and you got to keep this thing moving along. You can't let it go too far off the tracks. But I'm noticing that you're taking this in, and my hope is that you're thinking, that's pretty valuable, but I am the host, and we don't have all day for this thing. So, and the point is, if you can let go of your agenda and just notice things, and then one of the ways to be present is to notice things and then comment by asking the other person, I couldn't help but notice that when we were talking about such and such, you seemed more interested in that. Can you say more about what interested you about that? Or maybe it was something else. And so even if you can't read other people's minds, you can get past your own agenda and notice people. One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from a British psychoanalyst named Wilfred Bion. And he said, the purest form of listening is to listen without memory or desire. And what he meant by that is when you listen to someone with memory, you have an old personal agenda that you're trying to plug them into. And when you listen to people with desire, you have a present or future personal agenda that you're trying to plug them into, but you're not listening to where they're coming from because you're too busy selling your stuff. And so one of the things I talk about in Just Listen, and I think also in Talking to Crazy, is try to be a pal And PAL stands for purposeful, agendaless listening. Purposeful, agendaless listening. And I think if you pause and get away from your own agenda, you're actually going to notice things about the other person. And actually, when you meet people at a networking event, if you can listen intently to them, and one of the things that I do, but I'm just I'm old and I sort of older and I sort of, one of my friendly things when I'm at a networking event, and I try and get away with this with millennials like you, so I don't seem like such an old fogey. And so I'll go up to someone like you, and your tag will say Tom, and I'll say, "So Tom, what's your deal?" It's like my mafioso language. So Tom, what's your deal? And you'll go, "What? Yeah, what's your deal? What do you do?" And then you'll start talking. It's a little bit humorous. It's a little bit silly, but you'll start talking. And you'll say, "Well, I started self-publishing, and now I'm self-publishing books, and I figured out about it. I formed a publishing company." And then I might say, "Really? Where are you with it? Where do you want it to be in a year?" "Well, we're here, and so where do you want it to be in a year?" And the point is, my view is that the more that I get you to talk about something that's important to you, that helps you get clearer about something you're thinking about, the more grateful you're going to be to me. The more that I hit on you and try and cram stuff at you, the more I'm going to be like everyone else hitting on you. And trust me, I do a lot of that hitting on people, and most of it's kind of out of a certain nervousness. One of the other things that Warren told me is be more interested than interesting. Be more fascinated than fascinating. And my favorite quote, and I love this guy and I miss him every day because we have such lousy leaders in the world. He said, "Boredom occurs when I fail to make the other person interesting." If you think about that, that's a beautiful statement. And I think when you can help the other person be interesting, they never forget you. Does that make sense? Any of this stuff?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I'm just thinking, in my own life, conversations that I've had, like when someone really listens to me, especially like business issues or maybe personal issues, like a challenge I've been going through, and someone really listens to it. And then usually by the end of the conversation, if they're just listening and not giving suggestions, like I already find the answer, I already find the solution just in the process of sharing. And then I go home and I'm like, that wasn't like the best conversation ever, but all the other person really did was just listen. And so I've always thought that, listening was kind of a gift to someone because, they really get to be heard. But now I'm also saying that beyond just being heard, they also get to, like you said, clarify their thinking about things and really get past any struggles or challenges they might have had.
Yeah, in fact, if people go to, and you'll put a link up to this, what your girlfriend wants you to know. So I'm creating a small library of these video clips, but it's flash video. And what I do is I hack into the person and I take on their persona. And so what that talks about is what your girlfriend really wants you to know. And what it really talks about, and if I'm a girlfriend, and this is a little bit sexist and it can go in either direction, what your girlfriend really wants you to know is I don't want your advice or solutions. They just make me feel worse. What I want you to do is help me get stuff off my chest. And if you help me get stuff off my chest, I'll come up with the solution. But I can't get to the solution if you're too busy telling me what to do, and it just makes me feel crazier. So the little video does that, and the idea is it's a conversation catalyst. So you take this video and you give it to a spouse and you say, "Is this how you feel?" And they might say, "That's exactly what I've been telling you." But since you're doing it in a moment of calmness, you can say, "Oh, I never got it. So tell me what that is." "Yeah, I can come up with a solution, but you're like a deer in the headlights of a car. When I get emotional, you go like this, and you're trying to calm me down, and that's like, I'm like a bull, and you're waving red in front of me when you're going, calm down. It makes me feel worse. Just help me get it off my chest. I'll feel relieved. I'll feel grateful. I'll come up with a solution." Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's great. That's great. I love it. I'm wondering, can you apply kind of these lessons to writing? Because it's very different than having a conversation with someone where you're listening to them. But can you listen while you're writing a book, for instance?
Absolutely. One tip that's helpful is, it doesn't work for everyone, but write what it is that you'd like to read. So, so if you're writing fiction, and if you were to say, what I'd like to hear from this character right now is, and without editing it, it will help flow. And it's there's a book which you'll also recommend to your listeners called The Inner Game of Tennis, and the author of it started. He was the first sports psychologist, and he's a friend of mine, Tim Gallway, and he wrote The Inner Game of Tennis, The Inner Game of Skiing, The Inner Game of Golf, The Inner Game of Work, and he has these inner game coaching centers around the world. And the Golden State Warriors, Steve Kerr is a big devotee of Tim Gallway's work. Pete Carroll at the Seattle Seahawks is, and and basically what Tim talks about is when you think I should do something, you get all uptight. But when you say this is what I want to do, it flows. And so I got to know Tim because I was a bit of a golfer early on. And even though I was a good golfer, there's a golf club that nobody can hit except Jack Nicklaus back then. I'm dating myself. And it's a 1-iron. And that was something that was like hitting a putter before they had all these big clubs. And I never could hit it. I could only hit it with a fade. And I was a 2 handicap, so I was pretty good. But I could only fade the ball because it was like hitting a putter. And so one of Tim's lessons, and I went to a driving range, and I pretended I hadn't met him, and I pretended I was following one of his lessons. And so one of his lessons, and then we'll get back to writing, but I'm not boring you so far. So one of his lessons was take out a club you can't hit. So there I am at the driving range, and I'm pretending he's saying that to me, and I pull out this 1-iron. And he said, and this would be a lesson. He said, well, put a golf ball on the tee, which I did. I pretended he was talking to me. And he said, show me the way you'd want to hit it if you could. And inside you're saying, but I can't hit it. But I can't hit it. But he would say, show me the way you'd want to hit it if you could. So I just got relaxed. And I said, well, this is the way I'd want to hit it. I wound up like this. And I hit it about 230 yards with a draw. I had never done that. And I got spooked. I said, whoa. But the whole idea is you get into the flow. So what I might say to someone who having writer's block, I'd say, well, tell me what you really want to say. Tell me what you want this character to say. No, but I'm stuck. Okay, I know you're stuck, but tell me what you'd want this character to say now that they're facing this scene. Well, I'm stuck. Well, just tell me. Well, what I'd want them to say is, and it just flows out. Does that kind of make sense? So it's a way of shifting into flow and what you want to do, as opposed to, well, I should do this. And these are all the structure, and the structure just makes people who are uptight even more uptight.
Yeah, I love that. That makes perfect sense. Tell me what you would want to do. Like, how would you want this to be? How would you want this to turn out? What would you want the character to say? That makes a lot of sense to me. The other thing that you said that I really like is, change the should to the want. Instead of saying, oh, I should do this, I should do that, I should write this book, I want to write this book, I want to do this. That really resonates with me in my personal life, actually, is that there's some things in my life that I thought, wow, I really should do this. And I've been procrastinating, but if I just change it to I want to, it would be easy.
Yeah, in fact, we should do another interview. If you get good feedback on this.
We want to do another interview.
Okay. No, and how it's going to start is I'm going to say, Tom, tell me what you want to talk about today. Tell me what given our first interview and that it piqued your interest. Tell me what you want to talk about today. Well, I know what I should talk about because we're talking about books and whatever, but Mark, the thing I really want to talk about is such and such. Well, tell me, why you want to talk about that? Well, because I've been sleeping in the den for a week. and I want to get back into the bedroom, or whatever the heck it's about. I don't know. But can you see how it's a different sort of flow, and it's a way to help people bypass things. I also just wrote a blog that I'll send you a link to it, and it's called Solving for Simultaneous Experiences, using algebra to get unstuck in your life. And it's at some coaching site, and I'll send you the link to it so people can read it. But do you remember algebra? And in algebra, there was something called solving for simultaneous equations, which means if you had X, Y, and Z, you could figure out what Z was if you figured out X and Y. Do you remember something like that vaguely?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what simultaneous experience is, and why this gets unblocked, is that at any given moment, we have three experiences. We have a thought, we have a feeling, and then we have an impulse. So events trigger thoughts, feelings, and impulses, actions. And so if you're stuck in one of them, so if you're stuck in your thinking and you can't get through it, go do some activities where you get to either do or you get to feel, and that may unblock the thinking. Or if you're stuck in some sort of thing where you're acting and you're acting impulsively and you're just making things worse in your life, engage in something that causes you to think or feel, and that may stop the actions that you're stuck in. Or if you're stuck in some sort of feeling, do something in which you're acting or thinking. But it's like the X, Y, and Z thing. So the article is, I think it's called Solving for Simultaneous Experiences, and it was just kind of, does that sort of make sense? Just let go of one of the channels and try the other channels, and when you get back to the first channel, there's a good chance you'll be unblocked.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've kind of heard those distinctions before, like thinking, feeling, doing, but the way you just said it makes more sense to me now. Like I have a better distinction about that, because I can totally see when I was stuck in thinking, or when I was stuck in doing, or when I was stuck in feeling, and it just makes it easy to think about now. Like if I was in a situation where I was stuck in one of those areas, it's like easy. Okay, switch to the other one, switch to a different one. Find an experience that's going to get you to switch that method of, what do you call them? Ways of experiencing the world?
Simultaneous experiences. So it's a play on simultaneous equations. And so that's why it says, using the algebraic way to get unstuck in life. Yeah. And so we can provide that as a link too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, all the links and books and everything you mentioned will be in the show notes for everybody. Great. So Mark, any final words of wisdom or advice that you have for authors? Maybe someone is just starting out, brand new author, and maybe they are feeling stuck, or maybe they're just unsure of where to go or how to proceed. What advice would you give to them?
Well, it's amazing how sometimes being brand new and respectful can get through to someone who's really successful if you're respectful. So if there's someone that you really admire, you can usually get through to their assistant, and you're very respectful, and you say to them, in fact, someone listening and watching could do this as an article, and they can put it up, they could put it up at your site, and they could say, I went out and asked 20 successful authors, what is the one do-over that they would like to do in their career as an author? If they had one thing to do over, what would it be? Well, people love to talk about that. Oh, I wish I'd self-published. This whole publishing game is blah, 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 blah. Or I wish I'd gone to a publisher because I self-published and it just died. No one could ever find it. There was no distribution. I don't know what it is. But often when you're just enthusiastic and respectful, and also given the fact that the internet is so open, you can say, I'm writing an article for such and such. Or everybody can get on LinkedIn. And so it's a half truth, but you can say, I'm writing an article for LinkedIn. Now, people might think you're employed by LinkedIn, but no, you're writing it for LinkedIn because you happen to belong to LinkedIn, and you can put up articles. You can say, I'm writing an article for LinkedIn about the one, and I'm making this up, but hopefully someone watching this will actually do it, is what would be the one do-over you could do as a successful author, and why did you pick that? And what will happen is you may get a lot of refusals, but a lot of people would love to talk about that. So if you were to ask me that, well, Mark, what's your one do-over? I think something that I didn't think much about, and I still haven't, is what do I want from this book? Because what I am is I'm an itinerant, curious person. Meaning, if you did a Google on me, you'd say, he's all over the place. But I'm just curious in every direction that has to do with humanity and the way people do what they do. But I think if I had had more of a focus, so what would be a good outcome from this book? And early on, my book, Get Out of Your Own Way, I mean, as I said, it's this mega bestseller that keeps on selling. I never created a course. I never leveraged it. And if I had said, well, if people buy it and they want more, I could serve them better if I provided them that more. And I don't know anything about providing them that more, but maybe I could find people that could help me do that. And together we could build something. Because what happened to me is, well, I don't know how to build that more. I don't have the skill of instructional design. But gee, if I had a publisher willing to publish my book, I could certainly have partnered with someone and say, hey, you know something about instructional design. I'm about to get a book published. You want to partner? So I would think about, what is it that I want from this book? For me, it was just that I was curious and I like writing, and I keep little black notebooks. And this is volume 237. I have 45,000 pages. And what happens is I just write down stuff that I want to think about. And sometimes I go back to it and sometimes I don't. But I'm not a good role model for any of your listeners or viewers. I'm just this wandering, curious guy. And, and then that's why if you Google me, people will say, he's really interesting, but I don't know what he does. That's okay, though. At my age, life, the stuff that I've seen and the people that I know, I feel very blessed.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, honestly, I feel like the exact same way. I feel like an itinerant, curious person because I'm just curious about so many different areas of life. And, the same thing, if you go and you see my books on Amazon, I've got books on gardening and nutrition and business and marketing and just all over the place because I'm just curious. And I think that's what drives, I think a lot of authors, that's what drives them, is they're just curious. They want to learn about the world. They want to share information. And that's okay. I mean, obviously you've been very successful with that, just by following your passions, following your curiosity. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
So I got a new website for you. Okay. I give away business ideas. So you're not going to do anything because you're more focused than me. But the name of it will be Curious and Multiply. Like be fruitful and multiply. Be curious and multiply. I have no idea what you're going to do with it, but it could be an aggregator and say, if you check me out, I'm curious about a lot of stuff, but I thought rather than my having to be curious, why don't I just aggregate things for people who have a passion of as many things as possible? And here's the requirement. Your passion has to come through. It can't just be boring, but if you can write about something you're passionate about and why you're passionate about it, I would like to give you a home on the range called the internet. And then you call it the Huffington Post.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Good.
Awesome, Mark. Well, you shared just a ton of great advice and wisdom with us today. I really appreciate it. And before you go, tell us where people can find out more about you and the work that you're doing.
Well, I guess if you you can find me on Twitter at Mark Goulston, MarkGoulston. If you go to markgoulston.com, same spelling.com, I occasionally visit that, but I throw a bunch of stuff up there. I'm a consultant at a consulting company called Alchemy, and that's at thealchemy.co, thealchemy.co. Something that I'm getting a lot more traction with is I write for something called Biz Journals, and Biz Journals is the parent company of all city business journals. So that goes to 43 city business journals. So San Francisco Business Journal, Washington, D.C. Business Journal, Washington State Business Journal, Chicago, Dallas. So if you go to Biz Journals and put in Goulston, I've just decided at this age, I've just got too much to share. And so I'm putting up, I'm putting out all my tips and my intellectual property there. And so if you visit Biz Journals, put in my name, you'll find what I'm writing about. The latest one that they put up, which they actually they got more interest in, was called "The 7 Comebacks to a Verbal Bully." So these are the 7 things you can say to someone who's bullying you verbally. So they got a lot of interest in that. But go visit me there, and you can, any of these sites you can contact me, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Well, thanks for being here, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on.